Hello techies, I'm Divya here. On behalf of CyberBrainer, don't you think the world of tech is evolving faster than ever? Now is the perfect time to dive in and build the skills that will take you places. With CyberBrainer, we are putting you in the driver's seat of your own future. We at CyberBrainer don't just teach your interest. We believe that knowledge is power, but it's applied knowledge that truly sets you apart. Whether you're diving into data science, mastering artificial intelligence, or exploring the world of cybersecurity, our courses are designed to give you the skills that matter. So let's jump into the session and make the future yours today. Thank you.
Do you understand what is a search prefix? No, I don't think. A search prefix is again not related to reporting, but basically these are shortcuts to search. Or for example, if I need to search for a field of, let's say, a standard field or a calculate, I can use a prefix called field and followed by colon and the field that I'm searching. Searching is, let's say, higher. This is the search prefix. It makes your search that much more easier. And when I do that, its system now returns me only fields in the results. And it doesn't return me anything else. It makes a search easier. Similarly, if you want to search a business process, the search prefix is BP followed by colon. And I'm searching for all higher related BPs. And now returns me all the results. When I need to search for a report definition, I would use the search prefix called RD. It just makes your search easier. There are some common search prefixes that are very helpful. If you're looking for reports, the search prefixes are the field returns you everything. If you only want to search a calc field, then CF is the search prefix. CF would only return you calculated fields, it doesn't. Search prefixes allow you to search information quickly in the tenant you want to know the full list of search prefixes that Workday offers. There's this report called question mark. Just enter question mark and this will list you all these search prefixes with an example. If you're looking for an employee, the search prefix is worker. For business process, as I mentioned, the search prefix is PP on and forth. And it also gives you here, it's giving you some examples, but this is the full list. Again, the results returned are based on what you have access to. The system would never show you any results that you don't have access to in the tenant. I'm not related to reporting as such. I thought I'd quickly talk about that. Back to reporting. Where were we? We were talking about our headcount reports. All let's quickly run this report and then we can. All the other aspects of a trending. Report are exactly similar to a matrix report. What are the three broad differences between a trending and a matrix report? The first one is the data source. We use trended workers data source for trending report. Matrix reports can be built on any data sources. Trending, indexed or non-indexed standard. One of the grouping parameters of your trending report is time period, and then it could be your row grouping or it could be your column grouping. If you define time period as your column grouping, then you'll have to specify a row grouping. That's required, but if your time period is your row grouping, then column grouping is optional. We spoke about the count summarization and we saw that it's not really applicable for a trended report. Workday has delivered a lot of fields for trended workers, some unique fields for trended workers data source, which is what we would use. Transfers, promotions, terminations, count, hired counts, ending head count. They show you both activity and snapshot data, and I think we saw this yesterday. If I select snapshot, the results that I get are only related to snapshot. This is all the transactions or activities that have happened and that the data source captures. Whereas if you select activity, then it shows you all activity related transactions as all other aspects of a trended report, as we discussed, are exactly similar to a matrix. Which means just a matrix report. I can just a matrix report. I can go ahead and define a filter. I can define the drill down options again, exactly similar to a matrix report. We can define the detailed data. We can define the drillable fields. We can define the down options disable drilling or disable detailed drilling. We can specify how the detailed data looks or how to sort the detailed data based on the fields. Maybe you want to sort them based on the employee ID or whatever. You can define the fields based on which you want to sort. The detailed data, again, we can specify filter, we can specify prompts. I don't know if I covered this yesterday. If you see, there's no option to define a subfilter on a trending report, and this is also the case of a matrix report. In a matrix report, as in a trending report, you cannot specify subfilter. Can you guys say why? Why do you think or what? What would be the possible reason we cannot use a subfilter on these reports? What is the purpose of a subfilter? If you again remember our discussion, subfilters are used for creating filter condition on your related business objects. If you want to, let me quickly show. If you remember our discussion when we spoke about advanced report, on an advanced report, we can get data from a related business object. We can, for example, select compensation grade, which is a business object related to worker. And worker is our primary business object, and we are then pulling compensation packages, which is associated with this row, and I could have pulled any other information as. Now let's say I want to build my filter on compensation packages or any of the fields which is part of the RBO. Now I would not be able to include that field in the filter condition directly. What I have to do is have to go to the subfilter, specify the related business object, and then create the filter condition using the fields of that related business object. The purpose of a subfilter or you would use subfilter when you want to define a filter criteria using fields of the RBO related business object. There is an option to use these fields on the filter itself. Talk about that. That is through a calculated field. But then this is the purpose of a subfilter. Now the reason that tab is not available on a trending report or for that matter on a matrix report is because on these reports, if you see, don't use fields from the RPO. There's no column. There's no business object column in these reports. The only fields that we can use are from the primary business object itself. In these report types, Workday doesn't give us the option to define a subfilter. It doesn't exist. We can't pull in any data from a related business object in this type of We can. There's a field called LRV and I'll talk about that. There is an option. Now talk about that calc field. Apart from that, again, all the capabilities, as I was saying, are same. Prompts. Again, everything is possible, as we have already seen with other reports. Output. Again, I can define my output in terms of chart and table. We can all just table or just chart exactly the same options. The same set of chart types. And based on the chart type I select, the same set of metrics can be pulled. I can define secondary access. Basically, everything that we discussed with the matrix report can be done with a training report. Again, share option. We have already spoken about that advanced option. We have looked at that. In terms of every other asset, a trending report is exactly similar to a matrix report. This one other difference. We have looked at two major differences. The first one is the data source, and the second one is the grouping parameter. The third difference, if you remember, or if I can open the description of the trended workers data source. The description says, not the business object, the data source. The description says this data source captures last 36 months of data. And it refreshes in the background at regular intervals. Now, unlike other data sources, if you hire an employee or terminate an employee and run a report, an advanced report or a matrix report with any of the normal data, sources that change would reflect automatically. There's no process which runs to load data. Into data sources. All data is immediately available, but with respect to trended workers, data source. This data source doesn't immediately capture your activity and your transaction and your snapshot. It gathers data by running in the background. The second thing, this data source is not active by default. What I mean by that is you have your blank tenant, which is called foundation tenant. Once you load it with the basic setup, now you can. And if you have loaded your employees in the tenant, you can start creating reports and those reports will give you output. But that's not the case with branded workers. You'll have to activate that functionality and you do that using tenant setup. Again, I'm not sure if you guys have looked at this as part of your basic training last week. Tenant setup is kind of your central administrative cockpit. All the tenant-wide configurations in terms of HCM, recruiting, payroll, financials, various modules are done here. The in system under tenant setup, reporting and analytics. This is where this is in display. Mode now. If I click on edit, it will then open in edit mode. I would have to enable worker trending. If this is not enabled through tenant setup, then that data source wouldn't capture or any data. It wouldn't. The trended workers data source wouldn't run in the background and it wouldn't capture any data. The first thing, your worker training has to be enabled, and this is not enabled by default. You'll have to enable it as part of either your implementation or even later once you have enabled it. Then there's this task wherein you can do some additional configuration. It is to maintain trended workers. Let's copy this task. When you go to this task, it will show you the last time or the trended workers data source ramp. You can see it ran on 28th and before that it ran on 26th. It's running in the background every couple of days. Then it shows you the run type, the status, whether it failed, if it is in progress and how many runs. Records were processed as part of that run. Again, we don't have to worry about this, it is just your information, that's it. And then there is a configuration tab. Now again, I think we discussed this yesterday. The minimum granularity at which you can capture snapshots or you can capture or trended workers can capture data is at the month level. If you decide you want to build data and capture a trend on, let's say, weekly basis or fortnightly basis or any frequency which is less than month, that's not possible. You can do it on a quarterly basis if you want or an annual basis, but then the minimum granularity is month. And that's what is configured here. This is where you specify what is your trending period. Whether it is month, quarter. If you have set it at month, you can still run reports on a quarterly basis, or yearly basis or monthly basis. Second thing, the trending start date. Once again, trended workers data source only captures 36 months of data. If you go to the description, this pop-up comes up. It says, specifies the earliest date the worker trending data will be captured for. Note that worker trending note that worker trend tracks the last 36 periods of worker data or worker data that occurred on or after this date, whichever results in fewer periods. If you see, the date that is defined here is April 2021, which is less than 36 periods. This is December 22. It's only 22 periods or something. In that case, it will capture data only for 22 periods. But if I change it to 2015, but still it will only capture data. The maximum would be 36 if this date is before that. Or it would be, if it is after that, it will capture till that date only, whichever results in fewer periods. This is your trending start date. The next is the number of retroactive periods. Now, at times you have to do retroactive or the data source has to capture data source on a retroactive basis. For example, let's say in the month of July, August. In the month of July, this data source ran and it said the number of hires were 10, the number of terminations were 5 and your head count is 100. August, it again ran maybe. 5 hires, 0 terminations, and now your head count becomes 105. And this data source captures this information and stores this information, and similarly October and November. Maybe this is again in October, it would run it would capture the data now. Maybe in November, you realize that some employee should have been maybe terminated from September. And by mistake, you terminated that employee from November. You go ahead and make the changes and change the termination date to September now, because your data source has already run and it has captured that results. When it runs next time and it sees a retroactive change, it goes back to a maximum of 3 periods, and this is the maximum, and it would then update its retroactive results. Now, instead of 0 terminations, it says if there is 1 termination and your overall count in September is 104. But then if you make a retroactive change, it may be in August or July, then those periods are not recalculated. It specifies the number of retroactive periods that your data source should go back and recalculate. And then should we include terminations? Should we use international assignments? Or should we use the primary positions of international assignees for trended workers? You then go ahead and configure this information, and that's what the trended workers data source use. There are a few simple things. The first one is the report. Tags on a report. Any questions with respect to trended workers? All there are no questions. On a report. If you would have again noticed, you have this report tags or option. Now this is available on all report types. This is applicable for advanced composite. Matrix, all the reports. What you can do is you can assign a tag to your report. For example, let's say all your talent related reports, you want to create a report tag called talent or recruitment or hire or staffing or whatever. And then when you search with prefix called RDT, RD is for report definition and RDT is report definition tags. Again, it returns you reports related to that. And then you can also create custom report to get all reports with a specific tag, and this is especially helpful when you're working with multi. For example, you can create a report tag called in progress. Usually as part of implementation, when we are working with a large number of reports, we create tags called finalized or to be migrated. That makes it easy for us to manage those reports. How do we create a report tag? Just click here, create report tag, and it's just a tag. You can give it any name, and once you done do that, the tags are available and you can go to all the available tags and simply tag your report to that or those tags. Report tags are available for assignment to any of the report types. Now there's another feature of the reports, which is analytic indicators. I'm just thinking, again, this is applicable for all the different report types. You can use these in your matrix report, in your advanced reports, in any of the reports. Analytic indicators can be created for any of the report types. What are analytic indicators? Let Let's say I want to create an analytic indicator for, I think there are a couple already created for age, and this is an analytic indicator. If you go to a report, any report for that matter, yesterday we created detailed data override on a matrix report. And if you have seen closely, there was another option called Create Analytic Indicator. It allows you to basically attach a visual representation to your data. If you actually, let me remove this error first. Let's say if you come here and see there is an option under Create. To create analytic indicators for report. We also saw this option yesterday. Analytic indicators allow you to attach a visual representation to your data. For example, let's talk about performance. Any employees whose performance rating was 5, you want to show maybe a 5-star. And then employees whose performance rating was 4. You want to show 4-star, and then on and forth. You can create analytic indicators for any of your report data. For example, let's say I want to create analytic indicator for Create for age. That makes sense. Thank you. There is one already created. I want to create an indicator for age. I'll come. In here, as I mentioned, this is applicable for any of the report types I'll come to create. And then I'll create an analytic indicator same. This creates system-wide analytic indicator and it creates report-specific analytic indicator. I'm clicking on create analytic indicator for report. This is the field because this particular field had age in it. Workday uses that as the context. And I'm giving my indicator a name, calling it HA. And then I can select a visualization type. All these visualization types are worked and delivered. And there are lots of options available. For example, I can select visualization type for 5-star rating, which is applicable for example, your performance. I'm selecting this. One status is green, yellow or green, red, and now I'll define the condition. I'll say my control field is age because I'm creating my analytic indicator for that field. Now I can define the condition. I'm saying if age is less than or equal to 20 years, then my analytic indicator is green, and that's because I've selected the visualization type. If I change the visualization type, Workday would give me other options. And then I'm saying if age is greater than 50, then it should be red diamond, and if age is greater than 20, then it should be yellow. Created a visual representation. Again, as I mentioned, you can create it for any applicable data, and this is especially relevant for performance-related data. And when I run this report, I think after this issue with that sub-filter, we selected one specific a compensation package, and there's no data for that package. Oh, sub-filter. Again, I can also prompt this to the end user. I'm saying all to prompt to the end user, and then I'll leave it blank. Our analytic indicators where if age is greater than 50, then it should be a red diamond. If it is greater than 20, that it should be yellow triangle. And if it is less than 20, then it should be green. We could have said greater than 1 year or whatever again. This is how You can visualize your data. And we could have created this analytic indicators for a matrix report as based on the available summarizations. We could have created those analytic indicators there. Again, very simple, all your data doing is you're taking a field and then defining various conditions and saying if some condition is met, show some XIS, visual representation, and that's all we are doing. With analytic indicators, that was analytic indicators, there are a number of other calculated fields. Actually, I wanted to cover trending reports, not trending discovery boards with you. But we don't have. Looks we have a problem. Discovery boards cannot be accessed in using proxy. That functionality is not enabled for proxy. Discovery boards have to be accessed through drive here and here. Let's see if they have. Enable that option. If you go to Drive, this is where you create your discovery boards. But because we are in proxy, we are unable to do that. Ask the institute, and they're trying to sort this. In the meantime, talk about some of the other calc fields. Also talk about the other report types. And then I'll also show you real quick composite reports. This, as I've been saying, this is a very simple. This is an advanced topic, not look at all the use cases, but I'll show you how a composite report is created and built, and I'll show you one of the use cases. For it, before we do that, let me show you some of the other report types that I've been talking about. One of those report types is a search report. Again, if you remember this report that we saw on the first day find workers, we spoke about this report and we saw that this is a search report. What is a search report? It gives you that facet search options. It gives you these options on the now. How do we create this report? This report is very similar to an advanced report. What I'll do is people have already copied this report and created custom versions. I'll take one of those copies. The same process, create custom report. Report type will be search. The only exception, if you go to this report and let me edit it. This is a copied version that someone has created. They've added some additional data. They have basically copied the standard report and created their own custom version. The basic logic is exactly the same. I'm not going again to the task to create a custom report. I'll edit this existing report and show you. The first important aspect to remember, or for that matter, we don't have to remember. Because the moment you select the report type as search, Workday would only restrict your data sources to index data sources. These are the three index data sources which are available on the worker business object on a search report. Because search reports have to work with optimal performance, you have to dynamically or based on your facet search. System has to show you data automatically. That's why Workday doesn't allow you to select any standard reports. A standard data sources for creating a search report. Only index data sources are available. The first tab is search results. Again, we cannot directly get any data from the RBO's related business objects. There is an option available which is called LRB. Talk about that. Which is applicable for all report types. I can create an LRB unused field from a related business object on a matrix report, or a trending report, or even this report. But directly, if you see, there's no option to select a related business object and then get data from that related business object or get a field from that related business object, unlike your advanced report. I'll run this report again side by side that we can compare and see how this configuration fits into the report output. Thank you. Now on a search report, you add your columns. The first column that has been added is worker, and in the options they have selected this is the primary results field. Based on the field that is marked as the primary results field, Workday would then represent that field at the top. This is that workers field which is marked, and this is available under options. If you go to valid options, you're only marking a field as the primary results field. That's shown with that bold blue color. And then you are adding some additional fields and you can add. I don't think there is any restriction or limitation to that. We have added supervisory org location time type. They are then displayed here. This is supervisory org location of the employee. And then this is the time type of the employee, part-time, full-time. And then they have created another field or added another field which is pay rate type, and they have said this is detailed results field. When we add a field as the details results field, it is only available when you expand this section. This is basically you showing detailed data which shouldn't be, which is not really required to be seen as at the first glance. But if you want to see detailed data, then you can expand it and see that. Again, you can add any of the field types. The only difference is they have marked this field as the detailed results field. And then that's it. All you have to do is add fields to a search report, just you add to an advanced report. Other options again are similar, exactly the same. You can define your filter, you can define your prompts, you can define your output, you can define your share, all the same options. The difference is at the Advanced tab. If you go to the Advanced tab at the bottom, there is this option to add facet search links. What you see here on the left-hand side is again these fields that you have added. For example, you have added a field, and if you see, this is all we have to do. We have selected age group as one of the facet options. And then system shows it here on the left-hand side. And based on the age bands that have been configured, Workday automatically shows the relevant age bands. I think we looked at that task yesterday. Maintain age bands. That is where we configure those age bands, and the same age bands are also used in your to report or display data in your reports if you use age band as the group name. All we are doing is, if you see, adding these fields under facet options. Workday automatically identifies what are the instances of that field. When we select gender, if you have configured male, female, LGBTQ, not disclosed, whatever options we have displayed or whatever instances we have created for gender, Workday automatically adds them here. And that's all we have to do. Some are inactive and those are not shown. And that's all you have to do. All they have done is they have specified the options for those facet search. All the other reports, once you understand matrix report and advanced report, you know 80-90% of your Workday reporting, because those are the most common reports even when you're working in your client environment. Those are the reports you would be dealing with. Probably 90% of your time. All the other reports, they are based on those two basic reports. All that is your search reports. As I mentioned, I wanted to do discovery boards today, but because that is not enabled, and discovery boards is again it is the latest functionality in reporting. It was released by Workday, I think some 3 years back. Not even 3 years. Initially, when discovery boards came, it was part of this Prism Analytics suite. I'm not sure if you are aware of Prism Analytics. Again, it is used for advanced analytics. Prism Analytics acts as a BI tool for Workday. Normally, when we create a report, we are reporting on data, which is in your Workday ecosystem. That's all. That is what we use to build any of your reports. But with Prism Analytics, it adds another dimension to it. Prism Analytics basically allows you to get data from your third-party systems. You can actually get data from outside Workday, then blend it with data from Workday, transform it, modify it, and then go ahead and publish it. When you publish this data, Workday creates new data sources, which are called Prism data sources, and then you can create reports on these. Prism data sources. Prism Analytics allows you to basically combine data Workday as none. Workday data and non-Workday data could be from any third-party systems. For example, let's say, and this is a very common use case that I have seen in my experience with Prism. You do or your organization does this annual survey, pulse survey, or employee pulse survey, and on and forth, and these surveys are usually done by third-party tools. There's Perceptus and many others, and then the survey results are published, which is a good information. But what many organizations want is to understand the survey results in conjunction with your employee data. Let's say overall the belonging score for your organization is 8 out of 10. But then now many organizations would also want to know. This overall score across KPMG is 10. Globally or across our UK firm, US firm, which is probably 10,000 employees or 20,000 employees. But what we also need to understand is, what is our belonging score, let's say among males versus females, among various ethnicities, among our veterans versus non-veterans, and all those metrics. But then this information is available in Workday, your HR data, your gender employees' gender information, their ethnicity information, their veteran status is available in Workday. What you'd want to probably do is get the survey results into Workday through Prism and then combine the survey results against that information or information in the system and then publish results again anonymous. You would. Obviously, you're not publishing results for your employees, but then you can still publish results, which would then allow your executives to understand while the overall belonging score is 8. Belonging up among Hispanics or a particular community or particular religion, or veterans or non-veterans is probably 6 or 10 or 9. That is the advantage of using Prism. When you combine your HR data, which is part of Workday, with non-Workday data, plus there are other options as some of your companies are still on other technologies. Non-Workday, and you want to see all this information or report on all this information together. Again, Prism is used. The idea is when Workday initially released Prism, they also released discovery boards, which is again a very simple way to create your reports. It gives you that drag and drop interface. You can drag your fields, drop them into specific zones, and then it automatically generates your reports. It's a very simple functionality, but then that is only accessible with Drive. And Workday has a limitation that functionality doesn't work with. With discovery boards, let me quickly check that. Give me one moment. I just want to check something. It is active. The overall status is active. Let's say if I get compartment, Logan already has access. But the only problem is because I'm proxying in as Logan, I'm not able to access the discovery boards. Instead of that, let's look at composite reports, which is again a very handy option. What is a composite report? As the name suggests it. Composite report allows you to bring data from multiple sub-reports. What are these sub-reports? These sub-reports are matrix reports. Now, when would you want to bring this data? There are many use cases. One of the use cases is you want to club data from two different business objects. Let me give you a let's work on a very simple example. I want to get a list of all standard reports and custom reports in the system. Now we already have reports for that Workday, standard reports and all custom reports. But then that gives you detailed data, it lists out all the reports. What I want is against each report type. For example, advanced, there are 500 custom reports. Metrics, there are 300 custom reports. Trending, there are X number of custom reports. Y number of standard reports. I want that summarized numbers. And I want this information for both standard as custom reports. For that, I'm going to create two very simple reports. I have create custom reports as the task. I'm going to create custom reports. The task is create custom report. Now there's this business object called custom reports. And if I search, if I have to, there's this data source. And the data source is available on this business object called custom report. The data source would show me all the custom reports in the tenant. From selecting this data source, all custom reports, I'm creating a matrix report and the report is key PMG2. Custom reports by type. Once again, my data sources, all custom reports. Let me quickly check. We already have that report created. That's what I thought. Let's edit it and continue building this report. This report is being built on this business object called custom reports. The data source is all custom reports. And what I want is all report or the number of reports by the type in group. By fields, I'm selecting a field called report type, and if I look at the description, it returns the report type. Simple or advanced or matrix or on and forth. That is my grouping parameter, and then I want to summarize the data, which is basically the count of reports. And that's it. What I'll probably also add is another summarization which shows me the percentage of reports. And this would be a percentage of row total. Because we just have percentage of column total, not row total. I'm relabeling it as percent. Let's run this report. It gives me each the number of reports in the tenant based on. On the report type, and I have added this column, which then gets me the percentage. Now, similarly, I would create a new report to get me all these standard reports in the tenant. I'm calling it standard reports by report type. And there's a data source for this. Which is called all standard reports. And this data source is built on a completely different business object, which is standard reports. I am selecting matrix. Again, I'm selecting a report type. As my grouping parameter. I'll add one more column, which is percent. I'll select the format option. And then show column. Percent, and that's it. My reports are ready. Calling it. And let's quickly run this. And it gives me the results. Now this is perfectly fine, but what if I want to get this information on a single report? I want a single report wherein I want to see for reports of type advanced. What is the count of advanced reports? Sorry, what is the count? Count of standard reports versus what is the count of custom reports. Now there's no way to get this information on a single report. That's because both these reports are built on different business objects. Now, the only option for that is to create a composite report. One of the use cases for creating a composite report is when you want to bring data from different objects together. I would now go ahead and create a composite report. The task is once again create custom report. Now I would select the report type as composite. And the moment I do that, the options available change. Now, the first thing that I'll have to define is the business object. Now, this is not really a business object. If you see, this is the object which this composite report would use to determine which sub-reports can be included in this report. Once again, Workday uses this object to determine which of the available sub-reports. And when I mean say sub-reports, I mean a matrix report. And there are, if you see, hundreds of matrix reports in the system, almost 1700. Workday uses this object to determine which sub-reports can be included in this report. Now, if we talk about business object, you see that the business object on both these reports is different. On one of these reports, it's custom report. On the other report, it's standard report. Which business object do we select now? Now, we don't select this business object, nor do we select this business object. Actually, what we would select is the grouping field, and that's why when you are building reports or building sub-reports which you want to combine using composite report, you will have to select the group by fields, which is same. It is this group by field that Workday uses or the composite report uses to combine your sub-reports. Your business object here is not custom reports or standard reports, but it is rather report type. I'm going to use this. Selecting a report type as the business object, and I'll click on all. Now, if you see the layout of a composite report is unique. It's unlike. Any of the report types. It looks your Excel worksheet. Now you configure your composite report using these worksheet cells and columns, and now all of your major configuration happens through these columns. The first thing you'll have to define is the control field. Because you have to, or in the context of a matrix report, you can say your grouping field. You can see you're getting your data or you're grouping your data based on the report type. On a composite report, you'll have to define the control field which will group data from your multiple sources or multiple reports. Now I'll click on this arrow, go to define. And then the first field that I'll define is my control field. Now for that, Workday references the business object that you have defined on your composite report. When we defined our composite report, we selected the business object as report type. That becomes your control field. I'm giving a label to this column, and I'm calling it report type. Now there are a lot of options available. You can define styling. There are other options. You can define an override field. I will talk about some of these options, but a lot of these options are advanced, not actually go into those details. The first field that you define is your control field, and that is the business object that you defined. When you created your composite report, the initial screen was. Now, once you do that, now you can define your data. Now the advantage of using your composite report is that it gives you advanced formatting options. For example, on a composite, on a matrix report, I have no control on the layout or even in, for that matter, on a trending report or on a search report. Here I have much more flexibility. For example, let's say I want to leave one column blank. I'll come in here, I'll say leave this column empty, click on This becomes my empty column, and next I want to define my data. I'll come to defined in data. Now when I'm defining my data, I'll have to specify these subreports. Now, this is where that business object comes into picture. You'll only be able to select or you'll only be shown those subreports which are based on the same grouping that you selected as the object here. You just see around these 10 or 15 reports, including the one I created. I'm taking this as the subreport. I'll give it a name, this column, and I'm calling it standard reports count. Now this report has or both. Each of our reports have two summarizations. Now I can define which of those summarizations do I want to display in this cell. The first one gets defaulted, which is count. I can select the other one, but let's leave this count here. And once again I can come in here. I can add one more data column, and this time I would select the second one. Custom reports by type. This is custom reports count again. This has two summarizations. The first one gets defaulted. I'll leave it as is for now. Or let's quickly run this report and see how the output looks when I run it. You see, this is how the output looks. This is that controlled column that I defined, my very first column, and I said the control column is report type. Workday then displays all the report type. And then the second column, I said I want to leave it empty. The third column, I said I brought this from the standard reports and I'm showing that. Information here. And the fourth column, once again, is from the custom reports. Now I wanted to do a few other modifications or enhancements, not just these individual columns. What I also want is the count of or the overall count. Composite to 2, 1, 2 plus 284 I. Want to add values in these cells or in these columns. I'll go back a composite report. Always opens in edit mode. When you click on it, you don't have to go to the related actions. And click on edit. It always opens it. Edit mode. Now I'm adding a new cell and I'm calling it a calculation. I'll go in here. There are different calculation options available. We have some range, we have difference multiply, and on and forth. There are quite a few options available for doing your calculations. Sum is when you simply want to add two values. In this case, for example, I want to add data in my cell 3 with cell 4. But let's say I want to sum data from cell 3, cell 4, cell 5 and cell 4. cell 6, and then I'll use cell sum range. In this case, I can use sum or sum range it. Doesn't matter. When I want to sum, I am saying add this with this. And I'll give this a name, which is a total. A report count. If I run this, this gives me the overall count. As I mentioned, with a composite report, you have full control on deciding what should be your overall report layout. In other reports, Workday would automatically, or there's no way for me to control how these columns would be aligned. I just defined the sequence and that's it. Here we brought data from two different reports together. We did a calculation. Now we also have some additional data on these reports. We have these percentages. I have the flexibility and I can control where those are the values. From the same report, render on this composite report. Again, I want to add another empty column. I'm saying this column would be and here I want to define a new data column. Once again, I want to get data from the same reports. Key me to standard. Reports by type, and I'm calling it standard. A report percent, and this time I am selecting the second summarization. And similarly, I'm also getting data from my custom report. The second, matrix report for displaying the custom report percentages. Thank you. Let's run this report and then make a few other changes. It's showing the same numbers. Thank you. Thank you. There is an option. I cannot think of it now, but we can show percentage values. That's fine. Now I also would want to let me remove these for now. No deleting them. This removing this empty column. Now similarly, I also want to get the overall count of all standard reports and custom reports. Now that is not directly available if you would have seen. It doesn't give me the overall count at the bottom, and if I want to get that count, what I'll do is, I'll do that configuration at the row level. I would come in here at L1 and basically all the data that is rendered by each of these columns. I want to combine them. I'll come in here. Define, I want to combine that data. Click on Combine. I'll say I'll just give it a name. I'll say once I have combined my data, then I want to add the data. I'll say calculation or the data is combined in here. Then I can go ahead and define the calculation and say data, I'm calling it a total count. Now I get the total count. Now there are some. Advanced formatting options available. For example, I want to highlight my total. What I will do is I would go ahead and apply style. Now, there are a lot of Workday delivered styles available, and you can create your own content. Custom styles, as I want to come in here, and I can add a style directly from here. Or if I go to edit, as if you see there is an option to add style at the bottom. Come in here. There's this option to add a style. There are a lot of Workday delivered styles, and you can create your own custom styles. As use any of the custom styles which are created. I am selecting a Workday style called Grand Total. Because I'm displaying the total value here. And I've applied some style with a line at the top and bottom, and I can define my own styles. For other cells, as I want to define a style for, let's say, my total report count. Here, instead of using the Workday delivered style, For this column, let's say I want to create a new style. Click on Style. I can again use any of the available styles, or I can create a new formatting style. I'll give a name KPMG2. Now there are quite a few options. Here I can override the format. Oh, this is where I could have defined the format. Again, add those percentages and define the format there. For here, I don't need this. And that's what I was thinking. There is an option available. For font, let's say I want to use bold font size. I want to keep it medium or small, and they're not. There aren't a lot of options available. For example, in color there are just 2 or 3 colors. It doesn't give you a whole lot of options. I don't want to underline color. I want this to be, let's say, red color alignment. I can define the alignment center. Horizontal vertical fill, and again there are just a few options. I'm saying it would be gray fill. Border. This is where I can define my border. Top, I don't need any line. I'm saying for each cell, I'm defining my border. I'm saying no line at the top. Left, I want a single line or maybe a double line. And the color I want is black. Side again, I want a double line. And again the color is black. Bottom, I don't know. And then there are a few other options. I can define column, width, and on and forth. For now, I have defined my own custom style, and this time, when I run this report, based on the style I selected, system renders my data. We selected a gray field with red font. We selected a double line on the left, and the hand sides are, if you see, it gives you a lot of more flexibility. You can also do conditional formatting. Let's say in this row, wherever a number is less than 5, you want to highlight it in a different color, you can create those conditional formattings, and there are lots of other use cases. You can create repeating column groups that your data repeats based on certain parameters and on and forth. There are actually quite a few options available with Inaga in an advanced report. Let me quickly add that percentage. Just one column, and then we can take our break. Once again, I'm defining an empty column here. I can give it some style. Once again, I can mark it in some color. There are lots of Workday delivered styles. I'm taking this one again. I don't know what's in there. I'll define our data column once again. From our I'll use the same because I should have defined this style here. And I'll specify the style. Let's see there if there are any percent related styles. Percentage. There are a few percentage, 2 decimal places. That's what I'm using. Obviously, this is not we should have defined percentage based on. Column total, but that's fine. I can define my own style and select a specific percent value. This is how you can create your composite report. As I mentioned this was one of the simpler examples that I could think of just to show you the flavor of what this can achieve. Any questions? Excuse me. Having looked at this, since we're not talking about trending reports, discovery. Now let's look at advanced reports again and look at a few additional options with respect to advanced reports. And again, these will talk about KLS fields, but most of these KLC fields or all of these KLC fields can be used across different report types. The first one of these is the lookup related value. Now the cult field is called lookup related value. What it basically allows us to do is, it allows us to get value from the related business object. For example, let's say a worker is related to compensation grade, and on compensation grade we have this field called package. To get this data on this field from package directly onto the worker business object, for example, we can use it on our matrix report or on our trending report, or for that matter, we can also use it directly on our advanced report. In that case, not have to then. Again, add compensation grade and from there called package. We create a levy as the name suggests. It allows us to get a specific value, a specific field from the related object of a business. Object of a PBO, that's how we understand an LRV. Let's create our LRV for compensation packages. Currently, if I have to get compensation packages on my report, or for that matter, if I have to build a sub-filter, or for that matter, if I want to use compensation packages in a matrix report that we created, which is worker business object. Let's say I want to show this in the detailed data, I'll not be able to do that. The option is we create and love a lookup related value. I'll go ahead and edit my report. I'm adding this new calculated field, which is called LRB. I'm directly naming it as comp packages. The field that links worker with compensation packages is the compensation grade. I want to get data from this related business object, which is compensation grade. This is the compensation grade. This is that related business object. And the field then system would allow me to pull any of the fields which are available on compensation grade. You will see all these fields are available on compensation grade or its associated both. There are quite a few fields available. Then these are all related to the compensation grid. I want comp packages or comp bases. There are quite a few fields available. And normally if I go in here, if you see I search for comp bases. That comp basis field is not available for me. It can be only added. Through compensation grade, I'll have to actually go in here. And from here I'll have to search for comp basis. And which is also the case if I want to add this as my filter now, because I've created an LRV, I can directly add this to my filter instead of having to create a sub-filter. I'll go in and run my report. If you see this information, the compensation basis which otherwise I had to pull through. A compensation grade. By adding that related business object, I'm able to directly pull. or using the worker business object itself directly through worker business object, I'm able to pull grid. And now, once I've created this cal field, as I mentioned, I can then use it directly on a matrix report. This, of course, is a report-specific cal field. But I can either create a system-wide cal field, or I can create the same cal field for my matrix reports and my trending reports, and then I can add it to my reports. Lookup related value, again a very common. A calc field that you would be creating. Any report that you would create 99 times out of 100. You'll create an RV for it. There's a similar cal field called aggregate related instances. Now the problem with LRV, or not a problem, the limitation with an LRV is that you cannot get data from those business objects which are multi-instances. For example, a work can be associated with multiple addresses, and each address can have then additional details. Address line 1, address line 2, address line 3. The location of the address, the city of the address. Let's say you want to pull address line 1 from address business object onto worker. Now you cannot use addresses as the address. Lookup field, the reason you cannot do that because addresses is a multi-instance. Worker can be associated with multiple addresses. Love cannot be created for. For those arbors which have multiple or one-to-many relationship with the primary business object. Let me quickly show that. It will only allow me whenever I go in, it will only return the single instance fields. If you see that addresses multi-instance field, in fact every instance. Every field that is displayed here is an ESI, a single instance field. We cannot create an RV between the primary business object and it's a related business object where the relationship is one-to-many. Or let me add. Thank you. I'll remove this. We don't need it. Let me. Let's see. A worker can have multiple addresses, and this is that multi-instance field. Let's see what happens if I pull data on a report through the RBO, which has one-to-many relationship. I'll add the name of the address. I'll add a few more fields. This is the country for an address. Let's run this report. Thank you. This is how the data looks. When we add a multi-instance field here, and basically Gail Bradley or this instance of worker is related to 3 instances of Anupad. Addresses, maybe one of that is her work address. Then it could be primary home address. And on and forth when I add or pull data from a multi-instance field. And these are the 2 values of pulling the address title or the address and the country that address is related to. This is how I get the data on multiple rows. Now I can also create something called an R aggregate, related instances. I can create a calculated field which is called aggregate. Create related instances as the name suggests, it allows me to combine related instances for a business object. Worker is related to multiple addresses. And it allows me to basically combine or aggregate those multi-instances for the worker. How do we do that? I'll add this calc field here. I'm creating a new calc field for the report. The calc field type is R aggregate related instances. This RE worker address once again. Most of these calcals have the same logic. This business object is related to my address business object and which fields associated with that address business object. 2. I want to aggregate. In this case from address business object, I'm showing these 2 fields, the address itself and the country. It's exactly same layout as we did for LRV. Again, this time the business object, which is related is addresses. And from that address, and then I can build a condition. Maybe I only want to aggregate those instances. Which other country is US or which are of type home address? Or which are of type work address and on and forth. Same logic applies. If I have to build a condition, I'll have to build a condition to build it on the related business object which is address. And now I can specify the fields to aggregate. I want to aggregate the address field. I'll say copy. And I'll click on. And when we run the report, See, I haven't changed any data. I'm still getting the same information. But now all I've done is I have aggregated. This addressed the data from the addresses business object onto the worker business object. Similarly, I could have aggregated the country. Now, when we aggregate data, Workday would only show you unique values. Two of these addresses belong to US. Had I aggregated country, system would only have showed me two values. US and UK and not use UK US again. Quickly edit this cal field and not create a new one. I'll just edit this cal. Field and show you. I'm aggregating country. If we go, thank you. It only shows me that unique value, as a nook. Aggregate related instances allows me to group related instances. Most of these KLC fields are very self-explanatory. If you just understand the description of that KLC field, then half your job is done. Let's talk about a few things. Some currency related calculations. I'll remove all of these standard fields. We don't need them. I did date of birth. We don't need assigned organization. We don't need compensation grade. Let me add the total base pay amount. This we know is a calculated field of type currency. What it does is it shows the compensation in terms of the preferred currency of the user. A user can identify a preferred currency for himself or herself. And when they do that, a system automatically shows you the compensation amounts in terms of that preferred currency. I think we looked at that yesterday. This field, it's a Workday delivered field, and it shows you the total base pay in terms of your preferred currency, and for Logan McNeil, her preferred currency is US dollar. Everything gets converted into US dollar. There's another field that I'm adding again. Work they delivered, which shows the compensation in the actual currency. If I get my base pay in GP, this hyphen. That's the only difference in terms of name. What do is? We have two options with respect to currency. One is, I can show the currency symbol, or I can add a separate column with the currency code. Quickly run this and then further modify this report. This is currency. Show currency symbol, and then this when I select the option show currency code. Workday adds a separate column and shows the currency code. Now this is what I was saying. This is the preferred currency for user. It shows you that conversion. If you see, because the base currency here is Canadian dollars, and system also shows you the conversion in terms of US dollars. But this field directly shows you the amount in US dollars, and that's why you see the dollar. The second thing this field does is it shows you the annualized amounts. This is probably not. Probably this would be the compensation per hour for this worker. This is an hourly worker. If I He is on an hourly package and his actual total base 13.33 per hour, and this field it does two things. First, it shows you the amount in your preferred currency, and then it shows the annualized amount. The annualized salary for this worker is $20,000. All now I have, in terms of delivered fields, the total or the base pay of the employee. I would also want to understand the allowances that the employee gets. In addition to basic salary, an employee may have car allowance and mobile allowance and housing allowance and on and forth. Let me try adding that allowances. See if there is a field directly available which I can access through the worker. There are lots of calc fields. Not look at those now. Let's look at this one, allowance plan assignment details. Now, this is a text field. All it does is it shows the text representation of the allowances assigned to the worker. I should have added one more condition. It shows allowances. For example, Gail, she gets an entertainment allowance. which is you $800 per annum, a cell mobile allowance, which is $160 per month, and on and forth. What I'll do is I'll change the filter. And currently, I think it pulls only those employees who have additional jobs. I'll change the filter and pull only those employees who have allowance assignments. Now the other thing is, we are getting this data, which is not really helpful. Ideally, what I would want is, I would want the overall sum total of all the allowances that a given individual gets. Now there are different ways to extract this information. I'm just showing one of those options. First thing, I'll change the filter. We don't need this. I'm also removing the subfilter. And in filter, instead of additional jobs is empty, I'll say allowances is not empty. Now I need the total allowance plan amount for these kind of requirements. I can create a call field, and the call field is again similar in nature. We have some related instances. Again, the same logic, a worker is associated with allowances. Worker can have 0, 1 or many allowances. I want to sum the amount of those allowances or some any other component of a related business object. Some related with some related instances allows you to sum a particular field of the related business object that a primary business object is associated with. I'm creating a calculated field for the report. The function is some related instance. It says CFSRI work allowance total. Exactly same concept. The worker business object the related field. In this case, I want to sum the value of allowances. My related business object is the allowances that the worker is assigned to. Now here, once again I can define a condition. Do I want to sum all the allowances that the worker is assigned to? Or maybe I only want to sum car and mobile allowance. Or maybe I only want to sum allowances which are paid monthly or annual. Again, I can build a condition. The condition has to be built on the RBO related business object. In this case, I simply want to add all allowances that the employee gets. And then what field I want to sum? I want to sum amount. Now simply summing the amount wouldn't be of much help. If you see, if I just look at this worker, she gets one amount which is paid annual. And then there is other amount which is paid on a monthly basis. And there is still another amount which is paid on a weekly basis. Simply summing the amount of the allowances wouldn't be of any help. In fact, it would be incorrect. What I want is not summing the direct amount, but adding the annualized amount. Again, this is a Workday delivered field. And the way Workday automatically converts this to the annualized value. But this field automatically converts based on the frequency associated with the amount. It gives you the annualized amount. I'll take this field in some other scenarios. In some other cases, maybe you would want to use the amount field and not the annualized amount. This is simple, but when I run this report, I am expecting that this would give me an error. Let's run this report and see the output. Or thank you. Or let's see what is the error. And here I have this error. The error says the sum calculated field, the SAR that I created, it cannot sum multiple currencies. This error is coming for this worker. If you see Maria Cardoza, and let's go ahead and open. The worker profile. Thank you. If I look at the worker profile, compensation, and look at the allowances that the worker gets, she's getting 5 allowances. Now the problem is, if you see 4 of these allowances are in US dollars and the 5th one is in Canadian dollars. Whenever you're doing an arithmetic calculation for currency, I'm simply summing all the allowance amounts. We cannot sum allowances or sum amounts which are in different currency. Obviously, I cannot add 1 US dollars to 1 Canadian dollars. I'll have to convert them both into the same currency. And that's what is happening here. If you see, USD is the currency being summed. And Canadian dollar was encountered. See, it was encountered. For this particular allowance of 55 KD monthly. Whenever we are doing any currency related calculations, have to consider the implications of the employees having compensation in different currencies. Now, what is the way around? Let's go ahead and edit our calc field. Instead of directly adding the annualized amount, I'll have to first convert that amount into a single currency and then add those amounts together. Have to create a new calculated field of type currency conversion. Currently, for each worker, I go through all the allowances of that worker and take the annualized amount of each of those allowances and simply add it. Now, instead of taking annualized amounts and directly adding them, I need to first convert them into a single currency and then add those amounts. In fields to sum, I'll not take annualized amount. Instead, I'll create a new calculated field. The cal field is of type currency conversion. I'll just call it annualized. Amount and for now convert everything into US dollars. Here I'm taking the annualized amount, which is my source field for amount in this case, and then I would convert it into a target currency. If the amount is already in US dollars, then nothing happens. One-to-one conversion. And in Workday, you can maintain multiple currency conversion rates, or obviously, your currency conversion rates change on a daily, weekly basis. I want to take the rate which is active as of today, which is when the report is being run, and as I mentioned, you can maintain different rate types. Will not go into those details. You could have covered it in compensation, but again not relevant for us. Now I'll say return 0 on error. Now the logic is I'm taking the annualized amount of each allowance that is assigned to the worker, first converting it into US dollar and then adding it to this calcul, which let's run the report now. Thank you. This time my report runs fine and it gives me the overall total allowance. For the whole year, and then I can add the currency symbol if I want to. Now I have the total base pay, which is in US dollars. I also have the allowance, which I have calculated in terms of US dollars. I would want to now get the overall compensation, which is sum of the salary and the total base pay and the allowance. I am creating a new calculated field report. Function is arithmetic calculation. I simply need to add two different amounts. I'm calling it total compensation. And this is in terms of US dollars. I'll add US dollars. Now there are two types. of arithmetic calculations you can do. The first one is for numeric. I can take any two numeric fields. I'm taking, let's say, age, and I'll multiply it or add or subtract whatever another numeric value. And then I can specify if any rounding is required. That would be relevant. We divide, there are a host of options, and I can say select one of the available options, round down or round up, and that is straightforward. The second kind of arithmetic calculation I can do is for currency. When I'm doing currency related arithmetic calculation, the same logic applies. I'll have to specify the code or the code in which I'm doing those calculations. When I specify a code, let's say US dollars, then this calculated field would expect all data in terms of US dollars. Feed data in terms of a different currency, then it would error out this is not a conversion happening. I'm saying this arithmetic calculation wherein I'm adding or multiplying two currency amounts they should happen in US dollars. For example, if I select this total base pay amount here, now we know that this total base pay amount field shows compensation in the actual currency of the employee, and the actual currency could be US dollar, but also any other currency, then my calculator would give an error because it would encounter a value which is not this US or whatever I specify. Here, that's why for this, I'll take this field because I know this would always give me compensation or amount in terms of US dollars, and then I'll take this field because I've already converted this amount into US dollars. Total base pay amount. And I would add the calc fields that have created for the report, which is allowance amount. And return 01 error. Thank you. It's giving me the sum of see this plus this, which is the same amount, or here it's giving me the sum of this and this. Now I'm getting the overall composition of the employee in terms of the reference currency, which is US dollars. But I want to go one step further. I also want to get the, let's say, compensation, total compensation of the employee in terms of the total compensation of the base currency of the employee. For example, if my compensation is GBP, then for me the total compensation should also be displayed in terms of GBP. I want to display the overall compensation in terms of the reference currency for my organization, US dollars, but also the currency in which the employee is actually paid. How do I get that? One component we already know. We already have the total base P amount which this field, which we know would show data if I, for example, look at the currencies. Thank you. This is taking forever. Thank you. What I'll do is I would build a filter. What I'll do is I would build a filter. Let's do one thing. Let us add a new filter, saying total base pay currency. I am basically pulling only those employees whose compensation is. Let's say Chair and GBE. It took forever. Now this looks much better. This field is giving me the actual compensation of the employee in his or her currency. We already have one. One piece of the puzzle. What we need is the total allowance, which we have calculated in terms of US dollars. We want that amount in terms of the local currency, as and once we get that, we can then add this with the total amount. For that again, I'll have to do one more currency conversion. If you see, we have calculated the total allowance amount using this 3. And what logic did we apply? We took each allowance is assigned to the worker, took the annualized amount of that allowance, converted it into us dollars and then added it. That is what is giving us the total allowance of the employee. In terms of US dollars at currency. Symbol all the places. Now what I also want is, now I can take this amount which I know is in US dollars and I'll then convert it into the base currency of the employee. I could have done it the other way around as first converted everything into base currency and then this time we already have the overall allowance of the employee in US dollar. I just have to take that allowance and convert it into employee's base currency, which is basically the currency in which he or she is paid. My source field is that total allowance amount. I'll take the source field. Now if see I can only do conversion in terms of a single currency. If I add Canadian dollars and then want to change it to GBP, I can only use or specify one target currency. The way around this is to specify to use this field. This field identifies the currency in which employee is being paid. What I'm saying is take the total allowance of the employee and then convert it into that currency in which the employee is paid. Convert it into the total base currency of the employee, and this could be different for different employees. Again, do the conversion as of today. If there is any error, then return 0 on error. Thank you. Now, if you see I'm getting that amount in terms of US dollar, below system is showing me the conversion in terms of US dollars and it shows me that it is converting 1 Canadian dollars into 0.cent US dollars. I know that the amount is being converted into fiat for this worker. And for this worker, I know it's being converted into GBP because it shows me the conversion saying 1 GBP. If I US dollars. 500 GBP is this amount of US dollars. And I can see that it's working fine because this person only had 500 GBP annual, which was converted into US dollars. When we did the SI into USD, and then it gets converted back into GBP. At this point in time, now what I can do is I can create a new arithmetic calculation where I'll take this total base pay amount, which is in employee's local currency, and add it to this total base pay allowance. But then when I'm creating that arithmetic calculation, I'll specify the currency as total base pay currency. When I'm creating that arithmetic calculation, the only difference is I'll not say the difference. Target currency code is US dollars. Instead of saying the currency code field is US dollars, because it's not US dollars, it's not GBP, it's not Canadian dollars, it's not a single fixed currency. I want this to be converted or calculated based on the base currency of the employee. In currency code field, I'll say base pay currency for the worker. And then I'll add those two values. Currency conversions are a bit tricky. These lead to a lot of errors on your report. And also when you sometimes do conversion repeatedly. Your actual amounts may change by some fraction when Workday is converting amount into one currency and then reconverting it. You need to be careful when you deal with these calculated fields because the value may change by some fractions or probably more. These type of calculations are always tricky, though they are not very difficult. Any questions? There are a few other calculated fields. I think we have covered most of the complex calculated fields that I wanted to cover. There are some text-related calculated fields that I'll talk about. And then if our tenant is available, I'll also show you the discovery board functionality. Please do like, share and subscribe to our channel.